by and large, what architects do is what you see every day. They're designing schools. They're designing schools that are safe and effective and creating a nurturing environment. They are designing public projects where we all live and play. They are designing your urban centers, the buildings that people go to work in and the restaurants that you go to eat in, all of those things. And they exist for the health, safety, and welfare of the people who interact with those buildings. I always describe it like when you're in a space, you have a feeling and you may not even recognize it. Sometimes you have to ask yourself, how do I feel in this space? Do I feel a little claustrophobic? Do I feel comfortable? Do I feel happy? Am I looking at something beautiful and admiring it? And that's all architecture.
This is Associations Thrive, the podcast celebrating successful associations and their leaders. I'm your host, Joanna Pineda, CEO and Chief Troublemaker at Matrix Group International. Listen in as top association executives tell all, revealing the creative and innovative ways they're increasing membership, generating revenue, nurturing engagement, and reimagining their organizations. By the way, if you've launched a new initiative, created new member services, or updated your governance structure and are seeing great results, I want to hear your story, and so do my listeners. I'd love to have you as a guest. Go to podcast.matrixgroup.net and apply to be on Associations Thrive. Now let's dive into this week's show. Today, I'm speaking with Jennifer Briggs, Executive Vice President and CEO of the Texas Society of Architects, or TxA. Jennifer, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Jennifer, tell us about the Texas Society of Architects.
Absolutely. TxA consists of about 8,000 members. We are a component of the American Institute of Architects. We are the third largest component after New York and California. So working here with all of the architects throughout Texas, Texas being the 8th largest economy in the world. If it was a country, I like to remind people, even though I'm new to Texas, I still have that pride. And we're just serving members in education and practice, students, people who are working their way to becoming an architect, who are associates right now. We're just serving all of those members throughout the state.
Jennifer, who are your members? Are they the individual architects or are they the firms?
They are the individual architects. And we, of course, encourage firms to support membership in the organization and reach out to them in different ways. But at the end of the day, it's the individual architect who's the member. AIA has a unique three-tiered membership structure. I think it's unique, at least in my experience, where you join AIA National and then you're a member of your state and local component.
Oh, can you be a member just of the Texas Society of Architects, or do you have to be a member of all three?
You have to be a member of all three.
Oh, interesting.
So we have 17 components in Texas alone. And we have members who participate at all three levels, and some members who are very active at state level with TxA, some who are very active, at their local Dallas or San Antonio chapter, and then some who spend most of their time working with AI National. It just depends.
Boy, that's really interesting. So basically, you as the CEO, you're really serving the members, the individuals, but you're also serving the volunteer leaders or the staff of the components, and you're also interfacing with national.
Yes.
That's quite the job.
It is a job. I can tell you our large components in Texas have staff. And so that is separate function. And I work very closely with the staff chapters. We meet regularly. They participate in our board meetings as guests. And so we have a great open line of communication. And it's the same with AIA National. We participate in things like their leadership summit they just held recently, where we have our day on Capitol Hill and then have networking and education and that kind of thing. So it definitely can complicate things, but I can say in my career, One thing that's nice about it is that there is that one membership. So I'm not spending a lot of time at the local or state level trying to work on membership.
Ah,
We do, of course, but at the end of the day, I'm not selling TxA. I have to sell all of AIA. That's something that you can a little bit leave to AIA.
sort of, except a lot of times the members really have a loyalty to the local, to the state, or to the component, the local chapter.
Absolutely. I know there are people who are, and I hate to say this, but there are members in Austin, even where we have our office, that know they're members of AIA Austin, but don't realize they're a member of ours. That's rare, but it can happen in this type of organization.
Right, right.
And then, like I said before, some members are very involved with us at the state level and not as involved with their local or national. So it's an interesting mix.
Well, Jennifer, I have a question for you about just the profession of architecture. You know, I think the common person would say that architects, it's this vaunted profession, right? You hear about the Frank Gehry's of the world who do these gorgeous buildings, but architects are everywhere. So give us a sense of the breadth of the work of your members. Like, what gets done by an architect? What types of structures do they work on?
I'm so glad you asked that, because time and again, I hear architects are a luxury, and that's not how it works. There are, of course, people who can hire the architects to build huge homes and that sort of thing. But by and large, what architects do is what you see every day. They're designing schools. They're designing schools that are safe and effective and creating a nurturing environment. They are designing public projects where we all live and play. They are designing your urban centers, the buildings that people go to work in and the restaurants that you go to eat in, all of those things. And they exist for the health, safety, and welfare of the people who interact with those buildings. And so I always describe it like when you're in a space, you have a feeling. And you may not even recognize it. Sometimes you have to ask yourself, how do I feel in this space? Do I feel a little claustrophobic? Do I feel comfortable? Do I feel happy? Am I looking at something beautiful and admiring it? And that's all architecture.
So everything is by design. I'm actually looking at office space right now because we're giving up our lease and we're taking just a few offices. And so I was looking at one of those co-working places. I walked into one office and I thought, no.
Yes.
And then I walked into another one and I just had this warm hug of a feeling. And it was so interesting. They were like next to each other. It had to do with the shape, the configuration, the light, the view. I don't know what it was, but it was very interesting how different my reactions were to the two side-by-side offices.
That's exactly it. And I think we don't pay enough attention to that feeling. And I would like people to do that a little bit more. And when you think about architects designing for public spaces, think about all of the people who are going to experience it. And how does it connect to the rest of the area that it's in? And how does it connect to the neighborhood? And how do the people interact with it? These are all things that architects think about.
Wow. Well, we have a lot to talk about when it comes to TxA, but before we do that, we got to talk about your journey. So how do you get to become Executive Vice President and CEO of the Texas Society of Architects? You've had quite the journey.
I have had the journey. Without going into the whole story, I landed in an association when I was 21, and that was it. I'm an association person. From then on, I worked at the trade association in communications and then moved to education and membership, did all the jobs. I've worked for an association management company. At any rate, I worked for a number of associations until I came to the Indiana CPA Society, where I really learned so much and enjoyed my time and had opportunities to grow and learn and try things, experiment. And so I ended up staying there for 19 years, and it was in becoming the CEO. And it was an incredible journey. And I really appreciated all of my time there. But then the pandemic hit.
Mm.
And I am a bit of a pandemic cliche wherein things were so different and you have time to stop and think and an opportunity presents itself and you change your whole life. And so I actually wrote an article for ASAE that was published, just a brief, here's what it's like to change your career entirely, to go from CPAs to architects after 19 years.
And change state.
Change state, change everything about the change where you go from being, frankly, the most educated in the room about what's happening and the history of the organization and all of that to a new organization where you don't know anything. You've done your homework, but you still don't know all the names, all the past presidents, all of the issues they've dealt with. It's similar in many ways, but it's hard. If you don't think you have an ego, go to a new organization after 19 years and you will quickly learn that that's a hard feeling.
To not be the expert.
Mm-hmm. And so everyone, of course, was very gracious and knew that I was not the expert, but I came here because of my appreciation for architecture, just as a citizen, just as someone living in the world. I love architecture and how it makes you feel. And so I've done pilgrimages, to Frank Lloyd Wright houses.
Of course.
All of that sort of thing, lots of books and things like that. So when this opportunity arose, I had to give it a shot.
Jennifer, what's one piece of advice you would give to someone who's changing industries or professions, but they're association execs? Because it's different in the sense that the organization might be run differently. They're both associations, but the subject matter is very different. So how do you steep yourself in the profession or industry?
You read a lot. I guess my advice would be to be patient. I was not necessarily patient with myself, and that made it a little harder than it had to be because no one expected me to be an expert right away. But of course, I wanted to be an expert. And so I would say, patience, but also just soak it in. Go to every member meeting you can go to, meet as many people as you can, talk to the staff team about their history there and what their experience has been. Just read all the publications you can get your hands on. For someone like me, that I enjoy that. Research and getting to know something more deeply is something I really enjoy, but you want it to be fast and it can't be. I had to be a little bit patient with myself after a few months of going crazy.
Well, Jennifer, during the prep, you said that change management is a passion. I'm not sure that I've met a lot of people who would say that. So talk to us about this passion. And did you bring it to TxA?
Thank you. Yes, I know. I often attribute it to I'm an Army brat. So growing up, I grew up everywhere and I was always picking up and moving. So I guess change is not as challenging for me sometimes as maybe for other people. And I have to remember that, though, that it is challenging for other people. And so I find that if you're not changing, you're often not growing. And for me, development and continuous learning are really important. Now, let me say, change not for change's sake. And so one thing I think that I brought to TxA was this ability to help us evolve. That's what I feel like change management is. It's an evolution versus an abrupt disruption. Unless you are forced into a situation where you have to change quickly, most situations, most issues can be handled using change management principles in a way that while not everyone might be happy, you've certainly gained consensus and you've certainly talked to the right people. And you have looked at the culture and you have determined how to make your case a change, which I think is incredibly important. I went to get my MBA when I was in my 40s. I was looking for a challenge, something to learn, and I really enjoyed it. But one of the classes I took as an elective was change management. And it gave a name to what I'd been practicing and what I felt and what I saw, what I could see happening in organizations. And so I was really passionate about it. I tried to get the school to make it a requirement because I actually sat in a change management class with a young man from a big corporation. And at one point, he said, "Well, you just tell people to do it and they do it."
Oh, that works out really well, doesn't it?
And I thought, I don't think he's getting this.
Right.
That is a way to do it, but that's not a way that feels good to me. And I think the more I think about the association management field, it's about relationships, really. It's about supporting a profession, in my case, but it's also about making people feel good about what they do and about what you do. And so creating those relationships that allow you to say, is this a good culture fit?
Mm.
Making sure it's not exclusive, making sure we're reaching everyone we should. Do we have a clear vision? Are we communicating this well? Are we training people? Are we just changing something and then saying good luck to you out there? There are a lot of principles related to change management that I think we could all use a little refresher on sometimes.
Well, Jennifer, speaking of change management, let's turn to TxA. What change are you ushering in these days that you feel you have to manage? What are you becoming?
We have gone through quite a bit of change over the last 3.5 years since I came here. We have looked at our governance structure. We've looked at our strategic plan. Strategic plans can sometimes get unwieldy. One thing we did here was say, what are we really trying to achieve? Because if I, coming in as a new CEO, don't completely understand the strategic plan, maybe it's time to look at it again and not change our strategy. I think we were on the right track, but it was a matter of looking at the words we're using. Do they make sense to everyone? Are we all understanding the meaning in the same way? So that's something we worked on. We have worked very hard on our volunteer management process, trying to cast a wider net, trying to be more of a leadership development committee versus just nominating committee, though we still call it a nominating committee. And that I heard from Lowell Applebaum, the idea of a leadership development committee, because we want to get to know future leaders before it's time to ask them to be on the board. And that doesn't happen organically necessarily.
And it doesn't happen overnight.
Doesn't happen overnight. And if it happens organically, it's not always casting the widest net.
Right.
So we've been working really hard to get to know people, to ask them what they enjoy, what they want to work on. It's been a process. In addition to that, we recently launched a redesign of our highly regarded architecture magazine, TxA Architect.
Ooh, what'd you do? How'd you change it?
This was working with a committee, our publications committee, for over a year with a designer. These are design professionals. So you can't know the anxiety of distributing a redesign of something to 8,000.
Oh, I know, because I worked with ACSA.
Okay, you know. And so that was a very interesting process. The committee did an amazing job. We have an outstanding editor, Anna Calhoun, who publishes it. But architects have a lot of tradition. And AIA, Texas Society of Architects, really appreciates their tradition and their history. And so when we were looking at the redesign, I think sometimes it was hard for them to make bold choices because they want to honor the past while moving into the future. I love those conversations, though, because that's part of change management.
Ah.
That's saying, I understand what someone might not like about this or what someone might miss if we change it. However, here's our case for making this change.
And if you understand the ties to the past and to the traditions, you can help people move along. And in some cases, you still respect it, but how do you then change maybe the ritual or the design to honor the past, but also not constrain you too much?
That's what got tricky in something like the magazine.
Ah,
Because it's design. It's something very subjective in a lot of ways. And so you basically have to talk until you get people to tell you what they truly prefer and not what their compromise is.
okay. So hang on. So who was working on this redesign and what were you changing?
We have a publications committee there, all architects or associates. Before the redesign, they do things like select the articles and determine the topics for each issue and review it, discuss what we want to do differently. With the redesign, it had been 10 years. And we wanted to just focus on certain parts of the magazine and differentiate more. This part is design related. This part is product related. This is features about projects that are going on. And so you do a lot of iteration with something like that. You work with a designer. We had a very talented designer here in Austin, and he would come in and you look at a lot of examples and talk about what you like and don't like.
I see. Okay. Well, speaking of design, you've got a partnership with the TV series America by Design, which is a TV program. Talk to us about this partnership. What's going on?
Oh, gosh. We have been incredibly fortunate to get this opportunity. AIA National started working with America by Design. Mike Chapman is the host.
Right. It's a TV show on CBS.
CBS, it airs on many broadcasts throughout the country. And then, of course, CBS streaming. You can watch it anytime. And so AIA National began working with them, and then they reached out to us because Texas is big. We have a lot of projects, and it's been a really fun journey. We haven't gotten to air date yet for some of our projects, but we are working with our members and identifying the projects and starting to film and that sort of thing. It's a very unique situation. I'd be happy to explain because I've never seen anything like this. It's genius, really. Basically, the architects talk about the products they used in the project and determine the products they appreciated the most that worked really well for them. And then the show reaches out to these vendors, to these product manufacturers, and they contribute.
Ah, so you're not paying for this privilege of showcasing your members and the profession of architecture?
No, it's outstanding. And
Wow.
it does take staff resources,
Could be significant, right?
but it's worth it. It's a great public outreach to, again, we talked about people don't know what architects do. And so I think this is a wonderful opportunity to get that out there. And I wouldn't necessarily embrace this concept, except these are manufacturers of products that our members most appreciate. So we're not trying to force a situation, if that makes sense.
These are already products that they love and trust and use in their projects. So basically, like there could be a show about the renovation of an historic home in Alexandria, Virginia, or somewhere in Austin, for example, and the architect's going to talk about the project. So now you're showcasing the architect, you're showcasing the project, and you're showcasing the products that they use. I love this carpeting. I love this paint.
Yes.
Ah, we'll put a link in the show notes. And when do you expect to start airing?
Probably this summer.
Okay.
Some of our projects will be completely filmed and ready to go.
Jennifer, I want to turn to something different. You have advocacy pretty prominent on the website. What are you advocating on? And you're advocating at the state level, or do you also advocate at the federal level?
We advocate at the state level through TxA. Of course, our members, again, being members at all three levels, we do go to Capitol Hill. We were just there recently and advocate. But at the state level, Advocacy is truly the one unique thing that we can do for our members. I like to say we have an amazing magazine, but there are other magazines. We have an incredible conference, but there are other conferences. At the end of the day, no other organization is going to go to the Texas legislature and make sure that the license for architecture is protected, make sure that the circumstances that architects work in are optimal, make sure that architects are required for certain projects where it's very important for the health, safety, and welfare of the community. We take great pride in that. Architecture is a licensed profession, and the license is at the state level. And so advocacy is with the legislature, but also with the Texas Board of Architectural Examiners, the regulatory body, and going to all of those meetings and making sure that we are informed.
Wow. And you have something called Architects Day, which is like, it's kind of a fly-in.
Exactly. And I know most organizations, associations do something like that. We think it's really important to get members involved and to not be afraid to go talk to their elected officials. And so this year we changed it a bit. It used to be an event where everybody comes in Texas, you do fly in.
Right.
We did a quick, here's the issues, here's what we're going to do. They'd go have their meetings and then they'd be off. And it was rushed. And if you've never met with an elected official, it could be scary. It could be uncomfortable. We also felt like members, if they're all coming together throughout the state, they need time to network and talk to one another. And so we extended it to a 1.5-day program, which is a lot of time to ask of a member. But we had an educational portion, not only where we said, here are the issues, go crazy. We said, here are the issues, ask questions. What makes sense to you? What doesn't make sense to you? We brought in a state senator to talk to the group about how important it is to meet with constituents and to talk about what's happening right now. Because in any legislature, there's a climate, there's what's happening, there's what's top of mind and what's important to the leadership. And so we talked about that a little bit as well, so we could stay focused on the points that we have that made the most sense in the current environment. And then we were able to have a reception where we invited legislators and their staff. So that's a great opportunity for people to get to know us. At the end of the day, we have issues we want to talk about: school safety, construction permitting and zoning, qualification-based selection, all of these technical things. But at the end of a visit at the state, or I would say federal level, I always say I like to leave them knowing architects care about issues that are important to the community.
Ah, what a beautiful message.
I think that's what it is, because they may not remember, integrity of the built environment or whatever beautiful phrase we've created. But I do want them to say, hey, there's this architecture group and we should maybe ask them about this XYZ issue. That's what we're trying to do with those days.
And what you're doing is you're really activating the membership so that they're able to really advocate and be spokespeople or ambassadors for the entire profession.
Yes.
That's amazing.
And of course, we have a staff advocacy team and we have a lobbyist, but we work for the members and we want them to understand what we're doing and to get out there and to have their voice heard. And ideally, one day, some of them run for office themselves.
Right.
Because we could use that kind of design thinking sometimes.
Ah, interesting. Jennifer, it sounds like TxA is up to a lot of really great stuff. Before we go, March is Women's History Month. So I got to ask, what does it mean to you to be a woman CEO of this amazing organization?
It feels great. It feels incredible. I'm grateful to the profession of association management because I have been surrounded my whole career by incredible women. Because as we know, many associations staff are primarily female. And what's been missing over the years is that CEO level and moving up in the organization. So I am grateful to have the opportunity to work with so many incredible women. And then to be able to be in the CEO role, I feel like it's my job as much as anything to help other women and men coming into this profession to understand all the opportunity they have and to really appreciate it as much as I do.
Well, I love it. And it sounds like we have to have you back next year to talk about the changes that you're ushering in at TxA, because it sounds like change is continuous over there.
That's right. I would love to.
Thanks for listening to Associations Thrive. We're so glad to have you here. You know, my personal mission and the mission of my company, Matrix Group International, is to help associations and nonprofits increase membership, generate revenue, and thrive in the digital space. I want to hear stories of how your organization is thriving in today's challenging landscape. Please apply to be on my show by going to podcast.matrixgroup.net. By the way, do you need help with a digital initiative? Maybe it's a website redesign, a new membership database, or a hybrid meeting that you're planning. I'd love to connect with you. Please visit the Matrix Group website at matrixgroup.net. Thanks again for listening to this week's episode of Associations Thrive. Don't forget to subscribe to the show, leave a 5-star rating, post a comment, and share it with your colleagues and friends. Bye!